going to be talking to you today about trust and specifically around some of the very unconscious phrases we might use when we are not really wanting to trust something in particular. Now, the thing about a lot of the phrases I'm going to discuss today is they are very, very unconscious. We don't necessarily hear them, which is one of the reasons I want to talk about them today, because when we become aware that they are there, it can make a really big difference in our ability to see them. The truth is, in abusive households, there isn't a whole lot of truth. Gaslighting is kind of everywhere in abusive homes. That's by design, because if abusers can keep us confused, right? Keep us from being able to really figure out what's going on around us, the proverbial concept of, not being able to get our feet underneath us, which is both somewhat literal and symbolic in nature, because it keeps us from being able to run away from danger in both literal and symbolic way. We can't use our minds to get us out of difficult situations if we don't know what the truth is. If we are in a constant state of confusion or not really knowing what's going to happen next and what in some cases did just happen, because there's so much trickery, so many lies, such a lack of truth around us, that makes it very difficult for us to figure out what's going on. And while this particular trauma pattern is obviously a problem in childhood, it becomes almost impossible to live a good life in our adulthood when this pattern is playing out for us. And that's the problem. The problem with childhood trauma is that the patterns don't go away in adulthood, and we keep playing them out, but we don't know it, because so much of what we've experienced goes into the unconscious, because we can't make heads or tails of it when we're children. So we don't have any choice. We have to put it away. But then we have these defenders who keep putting it away throughout our entire adulthoods. And unfortunately, that means all that unconscious stuff, all that stuff sitting in the shadows, is going to be impacting that adult life if we don't know it's there. This is really a big problem. So all this trickery, all this gaslighting, all this kind of stuff, it is on a foundational level about trust. If we can't trust people around us, how are we then supposed to live a life that is anything other than based on survival, right? Which is oftentimes what we are doing. We are living a life that is based on survival. The other problem, though, is that trust is not very easy to build after all of this relational trauma. We have learned that all the key people in our lives, and a lot of times the people who we were supposed to be able to trust the most, are in fact not trustworthy, right? So we have to take the trust journey very slowly. We can't expect major changes quickly. And what I've discovered is that most of the other work we're doing is impacting our trust. It's impacting our trust with self. So when we start doing writing from parts, when we start getting to know what sits in our unconscious, we are building trust with self. And as we build trust with self, that then over time allows us to mirror that trust with self out into the world, bringing in oftentimes a lot more trustworthy people, because we're trusting self. So we are finding people in our world that we can trust as well. This is a big part of the trust path for us, the healing path for us. So the problem, though, as I mentioned already, is that a lot of what we've internalized is sitting in the unconscious. So we can't always hear it. So what I wanted to talk about first today on a practical level is what are some of the more common prompts that we may be experiencing or hearing that we don't know we're hearing, because it's all very unconscious. And I want to talk about several of those today to help you. But the first thing I'm going to do here real quick is check for comments, because I'm working on multiple pages now. So, okay, let's get started on the writing prompts in particular. Okay. So I have a few that I want to cover, and I'll talk a little bit about each one as we go. The first one is something I remember shocking my therapist with a long time ago now. They don't mean what they say. So this kind of an unconscious belief, or, as I refer to it, writing prompt, can come up in almost a situation. Typically, though, it'll either be something that somebody is saying that's positive about us, right? Or maybe it's like a promise that they're making to help us with something or do something with us, or just generally, it's something that's coming to us more from a friendly place. Okay. It's very common for us not to trust that sort of thing. And I remember when I said to my therapist many, many years ago that anything anyone said to me, especially if it was positive, had a double meaning. And my therapist had a great poker face, but I will tell you what, she was shocked to hear that one. That one really set her back. Now, she could have just been telling me she was shocked because she wanted me to see that it was, an unusual belief system. But I think I've come to understand, at least within the circles that I run now, which, yes, is trauma recovery circles, but let's face it, there's a lot more trauma than we want to believe out there, that this is actually not that uncommon. I've learned this. I actually believe a lot of people don't trust positive messages from others because the way we coped with our trauma was to blame ourselves. So we have a lot of self-hate, a lot of self-blame in there. So we can't really see positivity as real. It goes against something that's very foundational for us, right? So this is a tough one here, but I want to stress that it is worth writing from to get a bit more information around why parts may believe that they can't trust anything positive that's coming in our direction. And I also want to say hi to Jan. I'm glad you're here. Sorry about all the confusion, by the way, but I'm glad you found me in the end. It has been challenging. So that's the first writing prompt I wanted to talk to you about. But the next one I want to talk about is just actually what the title is today for this live stream, which is that they are trying to trick me. A lot of times, because when we were growing up in our families, there actually were tricks. There were promises that were not kept, right? But typically those promises came sort of like as a deal, right? Where it was like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. And if that happened enough, and in a lot of traumatic homes, that did happen enough, we will start to realize that the person who is telling us they're going to do something for us has no real intention of doing that thing, but that we're also really not at liberty to actually call them out on it. So it creates a lot of beliefs and a lot of survival skills where we are saying, I don't trust this person is saying they're going to do this thing, but I also can't tell them that I don't think they're going to do this thing. So I have to go along with it while actually believing it's not really going to happen. And unfortunately, because of the energy all of those beliefs carry, we do still tend to bring into our space people who are really not going to do what they say. This is the problem. Plus, if we still have a relationship with our family of origin, well, we're still getting treated exactly the same way we were in childhood. So what happens is there's a lot of reinforcement of these particular non-trusting belief systems we've developed, and that can make things really hard to change. But the first thing is to see it, because when we see it, and we write from it, we start to release that lack of trust. Again, slowly over a longer period of time. But as we do that, it does impact what shows up in our lives because our belief systems do impact that very naturally, either through our behavior, through look, I'll tell you, if you bring somebody into your space who's a really kind person and says lots of positive things and you never believe them, you will eventually push them away. So we have this tendency, because of these unconscious belief systems, to bring around people who keep those belief systems true, so to speak, in our lives. And I've seen this play out a lot in my own life. And no, this is not about victim blaming. This is why we're here. We're trying to change things. And the way we change things, the things we can control, is by moving out these belief systems from childhood, releasing it from our systems through the writing and through the emotional processing so we can have better things. A lot of people think this approach sounds victim blaming, but in reality, there's a hope here, right? There's a bit of optimism we could have because it is possible to make the change happen. Again, it takes time and it takes a lot of repeating, but it can. So that's that particular writing prompt. Let's see. Byron is saying dishonesty is also culturally intrinsic, but for us, it can seem more sinister. That's a really very interesting point, Byron. You're absolutely right. When I first started to tell the truth, okay, so I mean, it wasn't that I never told the truth before, but when I really committed on a conscious level to tell the truth as much as humanly possible, which for me felt really important, I was amazed at how many white lies I told. I was almost shocked by how it just comes very naturally to us to do that. And I think this is true across the board. This was a big one for me. And even little things like, oh, if I happen to tell that person that my kids are 10 instead of 11, then I'll get a discount on this meal, right? Or, hey, the biggest lie we tell is that we're fine. Because that's all people really want to hear when you ask how they are, right? Like, we know people, when people ask us how we are, or they aren't looking for all of the things that have happened to us and how they're impacting us now, right? So we say fine, because that's what's acceptable. So yes, there are a lot of ways in which dishonesty is intrinsic in our culture. You're absolutely right on the money. And yes, there are ways in which dishonesty is not meant to be sinister in nature. If we catch dishonesty, even on a small level, our parts will say, see, look, told you, right? That they will do that 100%, even when the dishonesty may be not so sinister. So yes, thank you for that comment. It's important. So let's talk about the next writing prompt, which is, this is too good to be true. This one's a big one for me. And a lot of times it's followed up by something like, they're getting my hopes up just so that they can crush them. Now, I want to throw out an important kind of thing to focus on here, which is sometimes things are too good to be true. We do have to be cautious. There's a lot of people in the world, salespeople and whatnot, that do want to try to sell us a bill of goods, as I know I age myself when I make that comment. But yes, that is true. So we do need to be cautious and not let the love seeker come in too strong, or parts that are young who may be convinced of things. So we want to watch that. At the same time, when things are going well in our lives, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a trick. Okay. And this is where we can move into this place of, it's too good to be true. It's all going to fall apart. My hopes are going to be dashed. It's just a matter of time for it all blows up in my face, right? Those sorts of things are things we want to watch, and we want to write from those when we hear them, because they are very important writing for us. And it's natural and normal for us to feel that way, because a lot of times in traumatic homes, we would have been promised things. We would have seen things going well. Maybe we would have started to get past some of the trauma and have some positive experiences in our lives, only to have those dashed, because abusive families can't let us get too happy, too confident, too joyous, too anything, because it's dangerous. It means we might wake up and start talking about what's happening to us. So generally speaking, the too good to be true thing is reflective of that. So we want to do writing from that when we can. The next one I want to talk about has been really big for me, especially lately as I work through some of my trauma. And it's this idea of, they are luring me. And it does have similarities to some of the other writing prompts I talked about today. But this idea of being lured, like they're And a lot of times it has to do with going particularly to physical places, okay? Where you may be meeting up with a group, you may be meeting just one other person, but there's this place in you that feels like you're being taken somewhere or told to go somewhere for something fun, and then it is not fun, which is reflective of our trauma. And it can cause us to become pretty isolated, pretty agoraphobic, if we feel like when we leave the home to go somewhere, to meet someone, or to do something, that something bad is going to happen. And that is reflective of traumatic circumstances, oftentimes from childhood. But I will say that some of those things, again, can continue repeating, especially when those beliefs are really unconscious and are still kind of running the show a little bit too much. So that is an important writing prompt. That one obviously can get pretty dark pretty quick. I've had some pretty stuff happen to me when I was lured places, especially as a child, but even at some points in my adult life. So being able to work with those belief systems is really important. So the last thing I want to talk about today is actually more on outside of writing, is other ways, other practical tips that you can use in order to keep building trust in yourself, which then automatically mirrors to the rest of the world. And these particular two tips that I'm going to talk about will help. They combine well with the writing and let you continue to work on building that trust. The first one is stop asking others their opinions about the choices you're making until you feel really grounded in your decision. Okay? This is huge because love seekers, karma kids, controllers, those three parts in particular, I refer to as a trifecta. They have been trained not to trust yourself, not to trust your own opinions, basically to disconnect you from your inner guidance system, as I like to say, because we often heard as children, your thoughts they don't really matter. They're not right. What matters is what we think. So you need to come back and listen to us, right? And so we can often learn at a very young age that we didn't know that the adults in our lives knew. And so we shouldn't trust ourselves. To be fair, we were probably on a more accurate and truthful path, which is why people would tell us this, right? But what happens in adulthood is then we'll get an idea, we'll love the idea, we'll talk to a few people, they'll say, I don't like that idea, because they're projecting their own fears, they're projecting their own limits on themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of times we go back to family of origin, which is ultimately the worst place we can go for opinions. And then we stop moving in that direction, which may have been more authentic and more grounded for us. So I have stopped personally asking opinions from others about things I want to do until it is well in motion. Because that way, if they come to me, they go, I don't like it, you're more in a position to be able to say, well, that doesn't matter. I'm still going to continue to move in this direction. It builds trust in your inner guidance system, especially once you start to see things work out. I mean, I can tell you that is the best thing in the world when you make a decision without anybody else's help, and the decision turns out to be a good one, and you see positive results from it. That is one of the best things in our healing journey, to be totally honest with you. One of the best. And so I really do encourage you to try this. The other practical tip I wanted to give today is something I call the trust rewire. It's something we can practice almost anywhere, any place. When you hear that lack of trust coming up, typically it's going to be looking for something to prove itself right. And look, there's got to be no shortages of things that prove it right. So what I often tell my clients to do, I spend a lot of time doing this myself, is look for trustworthy behavior around you. Okay? Believe me, there will always be plenty of people who don't that trustworthy behavior to your life. That's going to be there. You're going to find that. That's actually not even that hard to find. Like, you don't have to look. But there's going to be a lot of stuff around you that you're missing because it doesn't support your beliefs. So watch for it. Really little. I'm not talking about big stuff. It doesn't have to be big. Little stuff. Complete strangers. things people are doing for other people. But it also can be people who said they're going to do something and then they actually show up and do it, right? Take note of that. Really take that in. That's a big deal, right? So Byron is saying, wow, so then their opinions become feedback rather than authority. Yes. And I've actually learned over time when it comes to that opinion thing that most of the time they were really wrong. But what I found is that if I do the thing that a lot of people have told me they could never do, or it's really scary, or that's probably going to fail, or that's a bad idea, it actually ends up being quite good for me because so many people in this world are really living life from a fear-based perspective, and they're going to bring their own limits on themselves to you. Most times, controllers within each individual are the most powerful part, the most vocal part in our lives. That controller is going to be very fear-based, and they're going to be the most vocal in their system. And they're going to be the most likely to be the ones that are giving you feedback, right? So yes, like you could take it. You could take just what they have to say and you could look at it and weigh it, but don't weigh it over top of yourself. Never, ever, ever do that, right? But that, of course, takes a long time to learn because we were taught that that's what we had to do. Jan is saying, I am learning that I need to practice to be more present in the moment and not revert to reflexive caretaking and protective thinking, which silences me and causes mistrust. Yes. And so what you're bringing up there, Jan, is a really interesting point because a lot of times this is about trusting self, right? And when we do things like move into caretaking mode, move into, kind of putting other people before us, there are parts that are doing that. A lot of times it's the controller, but sometimes it's the karma kid or the love seeker, that trifecta again. And other parts will get mad at those parts and won't trust those parts to be in service of others or even in communication with others or doing things with others. And it can create a lot of isolation in our lives because freedom fighters don't trust that trifecta to set boundaries and do what's right for the system. So this is actually a big place where inner trust goes wrong for us, is that we have parts that are sort of self-betraying, and then we have other parts who are fighting desperately for our authenticity. Those parts are battling it out and they don't trust each other. So that's a big part of the trust and of inner trust we need to build in general. So that's a great example, actually, Jan. So thank you for bringing that up. So that's what I have for you today. And I look forward to talking to you all again next Tuesday. Thank you.